Hey Goblin, you've been really practicing those war drums.
I'll bring the generic goblin noise!
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. If you're looking for cards in the US, look no further as you can use the promo code MTGMudsta to get you 5% off anything on the site. Or if you're in Canada like me, you can use the same promo code at Multizone to get 10% off your orders of singles. If cards aren't what you're looking for, Original Magic Art has playmats, tokens, and sweet art that you can use that same promo code to help you get 5% off your order there. And if you just want to help out the channel, you can always consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month and join the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game finds us back at Multizone, with Jalbert playing Silas and Akiri keeping Spectator Seating, Ancient Den, Alibu Ancient Witness, Cloud Key, Esper Sentinel, Mystic Forge, and a Moonsilver Key. Kevin is playing Adeline keeping 3 Planes, Intangible Virtue, True Conviction, Sun Titan, and Grasp of Fate. Nico is back with his Grist deck, keeping 2 Forests, Swarmyard, Caustic Caterpillar, Saber Ants, and an Arcane Signet. Last but not least, we have Max playing Rakdos, Lord of Riots, keeping a Breaker of Armies, Neheb the Eternal, Rakdos Locket, Cryptolith Fragment, Mountain, Thriving Moor, and Kazul's Fury. Nico wins the die roll and starts us off. Nico plays a Forest and casts Caustic Caterpillar. Max plays the land half of Kazul's Fury. Jalbert plays an Ancient Den and taps it for white for Esper Sentinel. Kevin plays a Plains and drops a Champion of the Parish. Nico plays a Swamp and pays 2 for Arcane Signet. Unable to pay for the 1, Jalbert gets to draw a card. Nico then moves to combat, swinging the Caterpillar at Jalbert for 1. Max plays a Thriving Moor which comes in tapped and names red. Jalbert plays a Spectator Seating and then casts Soul Ring. He pays 3 for a Cloud Key, naming artifacts as it comes in, and passes to Kevin. Kevin plays a Plains and casts an Intangible Virtue. He's unable to pay the tax, and this lets Jalbert draw 1 card. Nico untaps and activates the Caterpillar to take out the Cloud Key. He then plays a Forest and casts a Masked Vandal, who upon entering, exiles the Caterpillar from his graveyard and takes out Jalbert's Soul Ring as well. Max plays a Mountain and taps out for Cryptolith Fragment, which does enter tapped. He can't pay the tax, and Jalbert draws another card. Jalbert casts a Rakdos Signet, and then plays and cracks a Mishra's Bauble. He then passes turn and draws with Kevin after looking at the top of Kevin's library. Kevin plays a Plains and brings out his commander, Adeline, and passes. Nico plays a land for turn and casts Saber Ants. Moving to combat, he swings the Masked Vandal at Jalbert, who takes the hit. Max plays a Mountain and taps the Cryptolith Fragment for a black, draining the table for 1. He's then able to cast his commander, Rakdos, Lord of Riots. Jalbert untaps and casts a Moonsilver Key. He sacrifices it to search his library for a land. He announces he's going to find a Mistvault Bridge and play it. Kevin plays a Plains and casts Grasp of Fate, paying the 1 to deny the draw. As it comes in, he chooses Saber Ants, Rakdos, and the Esper Sentinel. Max chooses to leave Rakdos underneath the Grasp, and Kevin then moves to combat. Moving to combat, he swings Adeline and the Champion at Max. This triggers Adeline making a 1/1 soldier token attacking each of his opponents, and putting more counters onto his champion. With none of his opponents having creatures to block, Jalbert takes 2, Nico takes 2, and Max takes 12, 5 of which is commander damage. Nico plays a land for turn and casts 3 visits. He finds an overgrown tomb, shocking himself to have it come into play untapped. Max plays a waste for turn and taps his fragment to drain the table again for another 1, and then taps out for Neheb the Eternal. Moving into his second main phase, he adds 3 red mana as his opponents have each lost 1 life, and uses it to cast a Rakdos Locket. Jalbert plays an island for turn, and taps it to cast Emery, Lurker of the Loch. He mills 4 cards as she enters the battlefield, and then casts one of his 2 commanders, Akiri, Lineslinger. He then casts an Ichor Wellspring, drawing as it enters, and passes. Kevin plays an Emergence Zone and taps a white for an Authority of the Consuls. Moving to combat, Nico responds with a Death Sprout, and targets Adeline. Responding to that, Kevin casts Oblation on his own commander and sends her to the command zone, but also at least gets to draw some cards. He then swings the champion and the soldiers at Nico, who chumps with a Vandal on the champion, but still takes 6. Nico untaps and casts his commander, Grist the Hunger Tide. He upticks the Walker, making an insect token, which enters the battlefield tapped and gains Kevin 1 life. Max plays a mountain and moves to combat. He swings Neheb at Jalbert, who does not block. Before damage, he activates the fragment to drain the table again for 1. In his second main phase, he generates more than enough red mana from Neheb's trigger to cast Breaker of Armies and passes. Jalbert plays a land for turn, and then taps Emery to target the Cloud Key. He's able to cast it, and names artifacts again. He then casts an Izzet Signet, and using the Signet plus the rest of his lands, casts a Mystic Forge. And moves to combat, swinging Akiri at Grist, who unfortunately gets taken out. Kevin untaps and plays a Plains. He taps out to cast True Conviction, giving his team double strike and lifelink. Moving to combat, he swings the champion at Max and the soldiers at Nico. This has Nico taking 12, Max taking 12, and Kevin gaining 24. Nico counts some mana and pays 5 to cast Sir Conrad the Grim, which enters tapped and gains Kevin another life. Max plays a Swamp for turn, and taps out to cast Eldrazi Conscription, enchanting his Breaker of Armies, which is now an 18/18 with Trample and Annihilator 2. This also has the table losing another 1 life as he tapped the fragment to do so. He swings the Eldrazi at Kevin, and Kevin sacrifices the Grasp of Fate and Authority of Consuls, and then takes the big hit. In Max's second main phase, he adds 21 red mana to his mana pool, but has nothing to do with it, and passes. Jalbert taps Emery to be able to cast Thought Monitor from his graveyard, and then casts it, drawing 2 as it enters. He then looks at the top card of his library and taps the Forge to exile it. He then casts a Dispeller's Capsule, and then taps out to cast his other commander, Silas Wren, and then uses the capsule to take out the True Conviction. Moving to combat, he swings Akiri for 10 at Max, who chumps it with Neheb. With the creature dying, Sir Conrad deals 1 to each of Nico's opponents. Jalbert then plays a Fabled Passage, sacrificing it and going to find a Plains and passing. Kevin plays a Plains and casts Soul's Attendant, followed by a Sun Titan. He gains 1 life and brings back from his graveyard the Grasp of Fate, and with it entering, exiles Sir Conrad, Emery, and the Breaker of Armies. With no attacks, Kevin just passes to Nico. Nico untaps and recasts Grist, making another insect token, which gains Kevin a life, and he passes to Max. Max moves to combat and swings Rakdos at Kevin, who takes the hit for 6. He then casts a Conduit of Ruin for free, searching his library for an Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, and puts it on top of his library. He then cracks his Locket to draw 2, and he casts the Ulamog, exiling Grasp of Fate and Sun Titan on cast. The Eldrazi then enters, and with nothing else, he passes turn. Jalbert draws and looks at the top card of his library. He taps the Forge to exile it, and just remembers he still has the Esper Sentinel, which unfortunately he missed the triggers for. He casts Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, and then pays the reduced cost for Alibu, Ancient Witness. He upticks Tezzeret by 2, dealing 10 damage to each opponent and gaining 10 life. Moving to combat, Akiri, the Thought Monitor, and Silas all go at Kevin, with Alibu triggering and taking out Grist, and Nico has it go to the graveyard. Kevin then takes his hits, and Jalbert then passes turn. Kevin's turn is quite quick, as he just recasts Adeline and passes turn. Nico plays a Tap Myriad Landscape, and activates Sir Conrad to have everyone mill a card. With no creatures though, no one takes any damage. He then casts Victimize, sacrificing an insect, and targets Grist and the Masked Vandal, but in response, Max casts a Tainted Strike, giving Sir Conrad Infect until the end of turn. With the insect dying, and the 2 creatures leaving the graveyard, each of his opponents take 3 Infect. He then activates Grist, making another insect token, and moving to combat, swings the Saber Ants at Tezzeret for 2, and then passes turn. Max untaps and casts Dreadbore, taking out Tezzeret, and then moves to combat, swinging the team at Jalbert, who must exile the top 20 cards of his library thanks to Ulamog. With 24 damage coming his way, Jalbert moves to block. Akiri blocks the Breaker, while the Esper Sentinel goes on Ulamog, and he announces he'll take the rest. It's at this point that the table realizes that Akiri has first strike, and he'll take out the Conduit before the rest connect, which means that Max will be dead before they connect. Max, wanting to go out on his own terms, activates his Creptolith Fragment to deal 1 to the table and then dies. Jalbert activates Emery and recasts the Dispeller's Capsule from the graveyard. He then casts a Chromatic Star off the top of his library for free, and then a Wayfarer's Bauble for free as well. Cracking the star, he draws a card, and then casts Whirlwind of Thought. He then casts a Scrap Trawler. Moving to combat, he swings Alibu, Silas, the Thought Monitor, the Scrap Trawler, and Esper Sentinel at Nico, with Akiri going at Kevin. Alibu triggers, dealing 10 to Nico's face, and Akiri is chumped by the Soul's Attendant as Nico gets taken out. Kevin untaps and casts Oketra's Monument, followed by a Loyal Warhound. He then casts Knight of the Accord, making a token from the monument, and then moves to combat. Moving to combat, Kevin swings Adeline, the Champion, and his soldier tokens that can attack that have Vigilance. Jalbert blocks the Champion with Akiri, but still takes 18 from the rest, and Kevin then passes turn. Jalbert casts the Key of the City off the top of his library, and then uses the Forge to exile the top card of his library. He activates Emery to recast the Chromatic Star, drawing a card from the Whirlwind, and then cracks it to draw another card. He casts a Loyal Apprentice, followed by a Dakin Shadowslayer, who enters with 7 loyalty. He then downticks the Planewalker to put the Gilded Lotus into play from his graveyard, which makes him a Thopter. He activates the key, discarding a card, and gives Akiri unblockable. He then swings Akiri for 16 at Kevin. With no mana to cast spells and no way to stop it, Kevin gets taken out, and Jalbert wins the game. Game review time. That was a pretty beatdown heavy game, with not a lot of combo, which is a nice change of pace. I was pretty impressed to see Adeline doing as much damage as she did, although unfortunately for Kevin, that Key to the City spelt his doom with Akiri. Rakdos did a lot of Rakdos things, which was cast Eldrazi for very little mana, but unfortunately for Max, he seemed to get a little bit too low for his own good. But it was a pretty spicy play for him to use that Tainted Strike to save himself from the Sir Conrad. Unfortunately for Nico, I don't think this was his strongest showing. We saw his Grist deck in another game before, and it was pretty sweet. But it seemed like he was basically just drawing a bunch of lands and not a lot of gas, which does happen from time to time. And the Silas and Akiri deck was a fun artifact-based deck, and it was neat to see something that wasn't Brea in the command zone in that kind of style. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.